Whether you're doing what you're doing to survive or thrive, you're alive. Just keep moving forward. That's the goal. Just keep moving forward. However you're going about it, because the butterfly's going to come, right? But it's just whether we have more joy or frustration along the way.
Adam, thank you for joining Tide Talks today. Look, I'm really excited to jump into a multitude of topics with you. But first, let's start with a little bit about you and your journey.
Yeah, well, Josh, thanks so much for having me too, and just what you're doing here, and inspiring people and the ripple effects that they get created because of you inviting people to come on and share, and just share honestly and authentically. It's awesome. So yeah, my journey, I would say life journey. I was thinking about this beforehand. It's kind of like a 3-part journey. First part, leading with love, then leading with fear, and now we're back to leading with love. And the first part started with lacrosse. Love lacrosse. It took me to a 5th year of high school to Dartmouth to play lacrosse, and then it took me into corporate problem solving. So I did strategy consulting for about 4 or 5 years, and then it led to me say I want to solve problems in the world. I want to keep doing this, and it led me to leave that and start my own business. And that's when the leading with fear started. I had saw a video that was like, there's all these problems in the world, and for some reason it got me in my gut, and we need to solve these climate problems, ecological, and we shifted our focus to how can we solve ecological problems. And I was like running around like a hammer looking for a nail. But then my friend asked me, he asked me the question is, Adam, what would happen if you led with love instead of fear? We were about to launch our company. We were doing beta testing. And he said, what would happen if you led with love instead of fear? And it started to reframe how I looked at problems, and also how I looked at myself and how I talked to myself, because I would see problems everywhere. The world's full of holes, and it was my job to fix this. And I've now kind of shifted that perspective to, no, the world is whole. We're simply on the wholeness that's there. Whatever we're going to look for, we're going to find. So if I'm looking for problems everywhere, I will absolutely find problems. If I'm looking for the wholeness, if I'm looking for the positive ripples of what's there, I will absolutely find it, and we can live and lead from that perspective. So that's the short, long version of how we got here. And that's what led us to connect, right? Like if it wasn't for lacrosse, we would have never gotten to meet, and this opportunity would have not come up.
It's true. And it's wild, the intersections that bring people together, or you sometimes, I think, find people that you need to along your journey at certain times that help kind of like help you evolve or grow on whatever path you're on. Or sometimes they can be the person that helps pushes you over, kind of a challenging time that you have in your life, and kind of getting through that. And look, one of the things you said that I wrote down immediately, obviously leading with love, a more abundant mindset, I think is something that I've really worked on. And you kind of have to continuously cultivate that in our world that we're in. But the second piece that you talked about was how you talk to yourself. And that's one thing, not until maybe like 5 years ago that I really started to like audit and think about the way that I talk to myself, the way that I react to the things and behaviors that I have. Help me understand a little bit more about like how you think about, the things that happen between the ears and the self-talk, and kind of how you've nurtured that over the years.
Yeah. Well, it was a mindset that served me really well for a while, right? As an athlete, I could never take a compliment. It was someone, doesn't matter how you guys win the game, however many goals you scored, I could never take the compliment. It was always, okay, what can we do better? How can we improve? And it was always comparing myself to this version of myself that I had in my head, and I wanted to just get better. But my friend asked me, he was like, would you ever talk to someone else the way you talk to yourself? Which when they asked that question, and as you'll see, like it's these questions that open me up. So it's not people giving me advice, it's actually questions. So what would happen if you led with love instead of fear? Would you ever talk to someone else the way you talk to yourself? And it was a very clear, like all capital no. Like I would never, someone's coming to me for advice, like I would never talk to someone else the way I talk to myself. And so what's almost happened was this, you told me how deep you want to go real fast, but it was almost like this death that had to happen inside of me of like, wow, this is how you talk to yourself for so long of, you know, you would see things that aren't quote good enough. You wanted to be better, and that strive to improve, and that led to better performance. That led to better quote outcomes. And what changed inside of me was that no longer served me. That mindset. Someone asked me once, like, Adam, could you ever predict how you're going to like die? And I was like, oh yeah, like probably from like stress. This was at like 16, 17 years old, by the way. Like, so I already had this kind of intuition of like, Adam, like you're constantly anxious, you're constantly stressed. And it led to like great performance, but did it need to be that way? And so what I've since been learning is like, no, like you can expand and grow. It's not just like nothing's ever good enough. And so changing that self talk has been a continued process for me that's allowed us to still see tremendous growth and like growth that I didn't even think was possible, but have fun along the way rather than just being this grind that like you're anxious all the time of like, oh, are we going to do it? Are we going to, can, it's just that clenched tenseness.
Yeah. So it's interesting the way you say that because I've felt kind of a similar thing from my life experience. Like in sports, it was always how to get a little bit better, how to be a little bit better. Now, what is it? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Is a very good phrase. I think that you and I both live by. But what I didn't realize, and I think what you're kind of alluding to too, is while that's a great mentality for getting better, there's actually, I think, a higher trajectory, which is when you start to play into, how you talk to yourself, auditing again, how you would talk to yourself. Would you say that to a close friend or even a stranger? And then why do we feel like we would say that? But I think there's also a level of growth when you get into the category of being vulnerable, being able to take compliments, right? These are things that show, I think, signs of maturation. But I also think it's a level of, and I don't know where it happened for me. I think it's like years and years of kind of like together of growth. But where I started to look at vulnerability as almost like a skill set rather
Mm.
than something that I actively avoided because vulnerable, you're showing any signs of weakness to me showed like a deprecation of self or not on the trajectory of where my mind thought I was getting to. But help me understand like how you look at vulnerability and how you've kind of evolved into that space over the years.
Yeah. So I'll share the phrase up front, which is it's called microdosing vulnerability, is what I've since learned to practice here. And there's two people who are catalysts to help me with this. One was actually a freshman on the lacrosse team. So I was a senior. His name's Cody George. And he came in like a small kid, was just like but really good. And someone would share a compliment to him, like, that was awesome. And what would he say? It's like someone gave him a gift. He would just say, thank you. Like with a smile on his face, he'd say, thank you. And it was so different than what I would like in my head. I'd be like, yeah, but I can do this better. So I saw how someone just took that gift. The second teacher here was my sister. We had a really big blow up. We call this the towel incident in our family. And it was me, my brother, my sister, and we'll talk about him more later, I'm sure. But my brother has since passed, but my sister, we had the towel incident where big blow up. It was actually my brother who used her towel, but I got blamed for it. But it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And you might think like, how does a towel catalyze this? But it was basically, are we going to just tolerate each other in each other's lives? Or are we going to go apart? Or are we going to go together? And it was like a real turning point. And we sat down and we're like, should we go to a sibling therapist? Should we, like, what do we do? And this is where the microdosing vulnerability comes in, is we realized that I never shared anything with them. So I could ask questions all day, but I never actually shared anything with them. And so as we moved out of the house and we're living our, lives in college, out of school, we'd see each other, we'd come back together and I could ask questions, but we actually didn't understand each other. I had not practiced any vulnerability with them, right? So I was still this old version of them, right? The high school Adam, but they actually didn't know me. And so instead of going to the sibling therapist, we're like, let's just actually start to talk to each other at first. And so I literally had to practice sharing. In this control, we call them our fishies calls. Last name's Fishman, so everyone calls us Fish. Our fishies calls where we practice sharing. We would literally go around and you have to share what's going on in your life. And then people ask you questions and you're on the hot seat and you have to answer. And that was a start of me practicing this microdosing vulnerability of literally sharing. And the mindset of microdosing vulnerability is that it's kind of like a workout. If I said to you, go lift a weight in the gym and you've picked up the heaviest weight and that's there, like you'd probably tear your muscle, right? But if you go little weight by little weight, you're creating these micro tears in your muscles and they grow back stronger. So there's a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of stress exposure, but you grow back stronger. Our immune system works the same way, right? You're exposed to a pathogen, it overwhelms your immune system if you're getting it in too high of a dose. But vaccines, microdosing of exposure, you're getting these little exposures that help build this resilience. And so the same way goes with building confidence is if you say, go wave your freak flag and go out in the whole world and just share everything with everyone, like, no, you're perhaps overexposing yourself to start, and you might have a traumatic experience that creates a lot of scar tissue. But if you're able to find these environments where you're able to practice sharing and build that resilience and have that exposure received in a positive way, it can help build more confidence and resilience. We can expand on that if you want, but that's a little bit on microdosing vulnerability.
I love that terminology too, because I think it is something that we're not all taught or, that comes inherently, especially I think in our societies today. And I like the idea of almost like dipping your toes in, and you don't have to jump straight into the deep end, but you can kind of like ease into what this experience is like. Another thing I heard you say is, as much as it can be, it was more of like a safe space that you were operating within, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to be addressing things that are vulnerable, vulnerabilities to me, or things that might have an emotional implication tied to them. So I think it is important to make sure you're like slowly stepping into that in a safe space, and then giving yourself the time and the space to kind of unpack what that
Mhm.
experience was like, and really kind of learn, because that, again, that's like the muscle recovery that then keeps you coming back and saying, hey, I can take on a little bit more. And I think, man, I just love the way that the two examples were so great on how like you've kind of microdosed into vulnerability. And then what has that, led to or yielded today in you?
Yeah. Well, so let me add on to this because I got a call from someone last night who they're in tears, and I get calls. It's often for suicide related to my brother, or it's often because how do I figure out what to do with my life? People in college or later of like, what do I do next? And last night was the what do I do with my life? And there's the tactical action stuff, right? Like, do I do this? Do I do that? But what we tried to spend more time on was the self listening of like, there are feelings coming up here. And so when it comes to how I've applied this to my life, is what I shared in the call last night, which is you're getting a gift right now. There are feelings bubbling up, and that gift is only going to be there for a short period of time. And we can suppress that gift of these feelings. These feelings are trying to teach us something. Something's getting shaken up. And so I can suppress that gift and say, no, God, universe, not now. I don't want that gift right now. There's other things that are more important. There's other things that are a priority. I need to get this email. I need to do this. Or I can take that gift and sit with it. And so my advice on the call last night, what I try to do with myself is, and whether it's someone's, talking to a therapist, a flow coach, or they just sit down and I call it self-listening, where you just journal. I set a 5 minute timer and I just let it flow. Stop the stimulation, stop the trying to go do, and just try to listen to what's coming through right now. And I found that taking the time to not just jump to action and listen to what those feelings are that are coming about, not to solve them, but to like think of them as a gift, as a teacher, be grateful that they're getting to bubble up for whatever the catalyst was, right? The towel incident with my sister, the towel was the catalyst. It has nothing to do with the towel. It is simply a catalyst for what gets to bubble up. And when we had a choice to suppress those feelings, avoid it, say, nope, we're not going to touch this, and our relationship would have gone like this. And I'm sharing this with you now because for those that haven't heard this story before, they would be shocked to hear this because me and my sister are like this now. Like we talk every day. She lives in Sacramento. Once a month we try to go visit each other and see each other. Like it's our relationship is rock solid now, but that's because we've learned how to fight and recover and disagree and have these big feelings and us listen into them rather than avoid them.
Man, that and it strikes home for me because I think not until I'm a big proponent of therapy and having therapists and all kinds of coaches in your life. Obviously, you and I see similarities in having coaches for all kinds of things that you've got going on. But one of the things that you brought up just now that I'll just share from my perspective too is that, one of the things is in therapy, I learned to identify the different emotions that pop up as like parts of me. So there's like all these collections of parts, and I almost look at them as like little physical parts. If you had like a circle within me, and it like represents all the different types of emotions. So now when I have a similar thing that you were just describing, high anxiety, something pops up that I just can't, not latch onto. I first try to start to identify like, where it's coming from, and from a place of gratitude. So I'll say, thank you part for showing up, or where, and I'll be very curious, where is this showing? Like, is it in my stomach? Is it in my chest? Is it in my muscles? And then by first identifying it and like being from a grateful perspective, I've learned not to fight it, because you have kind of that split moment where you're like, I'm going to suppress it, which is, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of us, versus, oh, I'm going to take the curious route. Where is this part coming from? Obviously, it's typically coming from an anxious state. Well, why is it? Where is it coming from? And it helps me to almost be like a little inspector, or like very curious with my magnifying glass and trying to figure out, where is this part coming from? How do I appreciate it? I'll even talk to it, Adam. I'll be like,
Mm.
hey, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming up right now. And like, sometimes I got to tell it, like, we have it under control. We're very aware that you feel this way. I'll write out like a plan sometimes. So then like almost my brain will be like, okay, part, we hear you. We have a plan in place. We can like, we don't have to be in a constant state of, anxiousness or anxiety. But I just want to double down on like, there's that split opportunity, and this is a chance where anyone listening can take a microdose of vulnerability. When you have that, that feeling or that emotion pop up, you can take the choice of curiousness or suppression. And part of what Adam and I believe in is take a little bit of curiosity and try to figure out where that part's coming from, because I think that's what we talked about at the beginning, this harnessing the whole self and understanding all of the, different dynamics. So I digress. Sorry.
No, I love that, and it's building it's building a relationship.
Yeah.
Like, it's building a relation we have this little inner voice inside of our head, how building a relationship with our gut, building, like, literally, like, that intuition's building that relationship. And I love what you shared there too, of the suppression versus the, like, touching it. Like, one of my favorite books is called Touching the Jaguar, and this jaguar is a thing that we're scared of, fearful of. And so when we dare to touch it, beautiful things can happen. But if we suppress it, it'll bubble up later. There's going to be another catalyst that's going to bub it's and so are we putting a band-aid on it and just covering it up? It's going to still be there festering, but now the next time another catalyst opens it up, it's going to be having fermented for that much longer. Can I ask you a question if that's cool? Because you mentioned, I love this, talking to parts, and literally sometimes saying, like, thank you, like expressing gratitude to that part that's expressing that emotion. How do you feel that emotion in your body and not just think it in your head? And I what I mean by this is, when I first heard the word gratitude, and I was told to, like, make a gratitude list, like, I could make a list of things I'm grateful for, and, like, it was very intellectual for me. It was an intellectual exercise, and it was harder for me to feel it in my body.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer because I think it's one of historical repetition and then how you show up today. So, and I think a lot of people talk gratitude. It's good to be grateful, but there's another thing in terms of like living in gratitude. So for me, it's, a gratitude journal that I'm pretty disciplined on, that every day I ground myself in at least two things that I'm grateful for. And it could be, I'm grateful for Adam. He's a really good friend. It could be very simple. I don't put parameters or, constraints
Yeah.
on what I'm grateful for, but by writing it down, I take the time and the energy to like funnel it from my brain to the pen on the paper, which there's something there, from a mindset perspective. And so I think it's this taking a long view of writing all the things I'm grateful for, because then they become real. They're not just thoughts, they become
Mhm.
something that I've put on paper and I go back and look. So on really hard days, I'll open up the gratitude journal and look back and be like almost time transported back into that place where I wrote down what I was grateful. I think there's also a natural thing of how you get into a gratitude type of state, which is, I think, what I try to get into on a regular basis is, how do I put my best self into this state of gratitude? And so one of the things is they talk about like slowing down in our very fast world and like being appreciative for the things around us. So I'll say that I'm grateful for things, Adam, that like have no exit. Like I have a sauna at my house. Whenever I use the sauna inside, I say I'm very grateful for you, sauna, for this like peaceful place and for like what, the healing that
Yeah.
happens in here. And
Mhm.
so I think for me, the way that I constantly get back into it, because our world pulls me out of a, gratitude type state just to do all the things that we do in our day-to-day life and being a father and all those things. But I think it's the practice of taking thought into paper or into word or into our universe that helps me come back to a state of gratitude. And then I think for you and me, and this is something we should probably touch on because we've alluded to a little bit, I think when you've dealt with loss, especially at an
Yeah.
early age or very close to you, I think you get a more long view on life and how vulnerable it is of a thing. And I think that also puts me in a constant state of gratitude of just having lost so many very close people, especially as a young kid. That really just reframed the way that I think about time. And so I think it's, I'll tie it up here with it's the muscle of gratitude, which is doing the little things that help to try to bring you back to that state. And then some of us, fortunate or unfortunately, enough have been through, certain things in life that just put you in a more longer view on time and how precious it is. And I think if you think about it that way, you have gratitude towards every second and every minute that you have.
I love that, and, the muscle of gratitude, I've had to train that muscle, and I'll share more about how I've trained that muscle of gratitude. I mean, it's what we do for work, it's gratitude-based learning and leadership. That's what Leading with Love, created, was that mindset methodology, was, but this muscle. And what I'm hearing you're saying too, which was absolutely true for me, is getting out of my head and writing it down, but then a practice. Just like meditation, yoga, anything, it's a practice. And so for me, I struggled big time with feeling gratitude in my body. And you just said something intuitively that I just want to call out, because I had to analyticalize it, if that's a word, for me to be able to practice it. So what I heard you saying when you talked gratitude is you said grateful for the thing, but then I heard you talk about the ripple effects that thing has. So like the sauna, you could say thank you to the sauna, but I heard you just verbalize the things that then happened thanks to the sauna, of the clarity, the peace, the this. And so what I found for myself is that I couldn't just think gratitude in my head, me getting out of my own head, and even like this computer as an example, right? I could say thank you for this computer in front of me. But if I get out of my head and I even write this down of thank you for this computer, because of this computer, me and Josh get to connect. Because me and Josh get to connect, we get to share stories, learn from each other. We're evolving. Because of that, we're also recording this, getting to share with other people. And so when you start to see the ripple effects and you literally write that down and then you just take a breath and you're like, hold on, all that from a computer? Now I can actually feel it in my body, not just in my head. And I have a friend, Eric Gefkin, who does an amazing job of this, is after he'll get coffee, lunch with someone, instead of just saying it's great to see you, he'll share the ripple effects. And so you get the feedback loop, but you also feel it in your body as the one reflecting on it, but then you get to share those ripples. And that's really powerful. And that muscle is one that I started practicing that in my lowest of lowest time. And by microdosing that practice and keeping then that going when things were quote good, when, I get the call about, my brother's suicide, it's almost like that's when your training almost kicks in. Like, how do you apply that mindset? If you've built this fundamental belief that everything that exists creates positive ripples, right? Like, and because you can write it out, you can look at a plastic water bottle and focus on all of the ripple effects that make you cringe to learn about the plastic, but you can also focus on all the positive ripples that exist thanks to that plastic water bottle and you getting to drink that, choose that both exist. And usually when we're in a fight or flight response, when we are worried about something, when we don't quote like what we see happening, we tend to only focus on one and say it's only bad, it's all this. But what I had to do was, when I talk my lowest of lowest time, what literally would get me out of bed, I would have a piece of paper and I would literally write down all the people that I uh, plan to connect with that day. And I would literally write down the positive ripple effects they're having on me just about the prospect of us connecting. And then I do it at the end of the day as well, because I connected with this person, this person, this person. I write down all the positive ripples that happened in my life thanks to that connection. And so then I extrapolated. I said, well, then the inverse must be true. If they are creating so many ripple effects in my life and they have no idea about this yet, I haven't even shared this with them yet, right? This is just me reflecting on the abundance of positive ripples, then the inverse must be true. Every single thing that I say, do is creating more ripple effects in the world than I could ever possibly imagine. So when I'm worried about, am I enough? Am I doing enough? The question, like, it's the wrong question. It's, do we realize how much we really matter? So in the really lowest of low, if you didn't quote do anything today, it was building that practice. So I literally write this stuff down to build that faith that like there are positive ripple effects that come from everyone, everything, even if I am so quote triggered that I can't see it in the moment. So then when, the most extreme that's happened with me with getting the call about my brother's suicide. So I have this one belief, right? And then I have this, this trauma happening. And that's what I worked with my flow coach on, of how can both be true? How can I have a solemn awe of what's unfolding here? I don't like this one bit. And I have very real feelings that are coming up, right? So how do I listen to those feelings, grateful for those feelings? Those feelings are coming up to change me. Like there is a evolution process that's being called to unfold here. And I can fight those, suppress those, and also say like, hey, look, there are positive ripples unfolding because of this. I'm not thankful that it happened, but I can acknowledge, right? That's why when I say the word gratitude, people are like, I don't use the word gratitude when I'm talking about my brother Eric, but it's a solemn awe. It's the same thing, but like for people that haven't been training this, like it's almost like a shocking word for them to hear the word gratitude in that context. Or in our work, we use celebrating friction. So when I say celebrating friction, that doesn't mean jump up and down, throw a party. It's like more of a solemn awe and wonder of what's unfolding here. And I found that to be necessary of a practice. And I'll practice it even in the smaller stuff. My bike got stolen and I smile. Like, do I want that to happen? No, but I can go on and on about the positive ripple effects that unfolded thanks to the bike getting stolen. I got pulled over by the police, and the police officer was not happy that when he rolled down the window, I had a smile on my face because I was just in wonder. I'm like, this is a chance for me to practice what's unfolding that I can't see. And I had a choice to go into freak out, fight or flight mode, right? Which is totally understandable, right? Like be frustrated, but then the ripple effects of that carry on as well. And so it's a practice, and we get to practice. We get a choice, even as a parent. We get a choice of how do I practice? Like the other night, right? Your kid's up from 1 to 3:45 playing trucks. You text me, and you're like, dude, we got to postpone this podcast. I have a choice to be like, well, shoot, I had a scheduled plan around this. Like, right, I have a choice to take that route, or I have a choice to say, I wonder what's unfolding thanks to this. And if there was an emotional reaction inside of me, I have an opportunity to say, I wonder why that feeling's bubbling up. There wasn't that feeling because I've been practicing this so much in other settings. So I was able to be in wonder of, wow, I wonder what the positive ripples are coming from for this. Because at the end of the day, I can't control a lot of things. I can control my reaction to what's happening. And I know you've shared this quote with me before, and I love this quote is that things don't happen to you, they happen for you.
Mhm.
But if you only try to start practicing that when times are tough, it's very hard to practice that. It's very hard to internalize that. So if we practice things when things are easier, and this is the microdosing part, right? Microdose vulnerability. Practice this stuff when times are good with people you love in a more controlled environment. And then we're able to build to more neutral and tougher situations and in less controlled environments. And it's almost like a faith building plan.
And that I wrote this down because this is one of the things that I keep coming back to is you want to develop this muscle for the hard times. You don't It's like knowing that we have some big physical competition that we inevitably is coming in front of us. We don't know when, but it's coming in the future. And what we try to I think we think about is, okay, how do I keep growing muscularly every day so I can show up for this unforeseen competition? Well, the same thing is going to happen from an emotional standpoint in your life, right? You're going to have emotional challenges and things that happen to you. And what Adam and I are talking about is you should start right now in terms of microdosing vulnerability and starting to develop the muscles that help you understand or take the terrible things are going to happen in all of our lives. It's part of the human experience. How do we take those things and reframe them as opportunities for growth, opportunities to learn more about ourselves, to become more introspective, to become a better version of ourselves for all of the people around us? And then we talk about what that ripple effect looks like, right? When you start to take on a different mindset, because we're not here to tell you that life isn't going to be challenging or there are going to be days where it's hard to get out of bed. That's part of what life is about. But I think for us, it's how have you started on this mission of looking inside at your own self? How are you developing little disciplines or little activities that help put you in this mindset so that when really challenging things happen in the human experience, that we're able to move forward from them or with them. I would say not from them, but we take them with us as a new version of ourselves. And I think you use the term evolution, and like, man, that's one of the things I think as a man, I always thought there's like, hey, you reach this status and you got the man stamp, you're good to go. But like what I've really learned is like being a man is the evolution of all the parts that encompass us, and even some of the more challenging pieces, like tapping into all of our emotional states and being vulnerable and appreciative of what they are, and then using them as tools to learn because they're ultimately helping us learn or grow. Or you suppress them and they're going to come up later on, but even more intensely, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to blabber too long here, but I
No,
think it.
I appreciate it because I think I shared with you before this, and we talked about like what's one of the best possible outcomes of this podcast, and it actually ties to the point I want to make here, which is we had shared of like that we're going to be learning new stuff in this too, right? We're not coming in with all the answers. Like there's stuff that's going to bubble up inside of us in this conversation, and we're going to evolve and discover as we're going. And that's getting to happen right now too, because much as we just talked about how we want to microdose vulnerability and essentially like train a mindset so that when times are tough, we can actually utilize that mindset. Life's not just meant to be some means to an end. And so I've also found tremendous value in practicing this for the now, right? Of practicing this to find even more joy in this conversation, to find even more joy in like the mundaneness of, whatever aspect of life you're like, it's just a quote boring thing, right? So in the present moment, being able to enjoy the quote good stuff even more and the mundane stuff. Yes. So I love that. In a visual metaphor that I've found with this is the butterfly. I'd learned on a Radio Lab episode at one point that you've got the caterpillar, the cocoon, and the butterfly, right? And if you were to cut open the cocoon on day one, right? So caterpillar, it's this big, juicy, cozy caterpillar, right? Life is good. They're eating the good stuff. You're good in your ways, and they go in this cocoon. And if you cut it open on day one, what you'll find is goop. It literally like decomposes into this goop, and then it goes into this big, beautiful butterfly. And I was talking with someone recently about this, and I had to deliver to them the kind of the tough news is that you can't go backwards when you're in your journey of transformation. And that's what's tough is right. Like things were good. Like it was cozy. I didn't ask. Like sometimes we ask, like we choose to evolve, right? We choose to go to a school. We choose to take a job. We choose the catalyst for that evolution. But I didn't choose for my brother to die. Like I didn't choose for that. And so I was kind of forced into a cocoon of transformation and you can't go backwards from that. And so you can fight the goop that you're in. You can fight it. The other side is a big, beautiful butterfly. But when we're in that cocoon, right? The cocoon is that container of whatever the catalyst was. And things were cozy beforehand, right? Like I felt good. I felt really good in that. But I will say on the other side of this, like there is a beautiful butterfly that's emerged thanks to many of the lessons my brother continues to teach me. And so I write with him every Friday. And so we're recording this on a Friday. Shortly after this, I'm going to pull out my phone and freeform write as if he's living in Australia and we just haven't seen each. He's like, you know what? I need to move here and I'm going to live here the rest of my life. Like just writing and just listen to what's going to come. And sometimes it's song lyrics. Sometimes it's questions I didn't even know I was asking. But when I'm in that process of goop, someone once told me like, that's not the time for push for answers. When you're in the goop, that's the time to listen. That's the time to move your body, listen. And what I've found is the more I push, the more anxious I get is because I want things now in my time. I want to control, right? What's going to happen. Unfortunately, you can't control transformation and change. It's going to happen on its own time. You're going to meet some person, you're going to read something, like something's going to unfold when it's meant to. And our job is just to keep going forward. However you're going about it, just keep moving forward because the butterfly is going to come, right? But it's just whether we have more joy or frustration along the way.
I was wondering, you talk to a lot of people who are in the goop, right? They call you because they know that you've been through it. You're a trusted advisor to these people. Very tangibly, what are things that you're telling people when they're in the goop and kind of like
Yeah.
specifically how you help guide people through some of these scenarios?
Yeah. So I do get a lot of calls, and the two of the most common ones are someone I know just took their life, and nothing like this has ever happened. Like what? And I'm their first call often. Or what do I do with my life? Like I'm overwhelmed. Like I'm about to graduate. I'm doing like, or I'm in the real world. A change has happened. What do I do next? And I learned this also thanks to my brother Eric, where I got to talk to him hours before I got that unfortunate call. And I have zero regrets about what I shared with him in that moment. I had no idea it was going to be our last conversation. But if you said, Adam, you have 5 minutes to inspire hope in someone, like I have zero regrets about that last call because the call ended and I just had this urge to call him back and I called him back and it was like hope to keep going forward. And so here's what I did then and here's what I do now. What I did then was I shared advice, and that's not what I do now. So what I did then was I said, I'm like, look, this is a period in time, and I try to contextualize it. I was like, he's like, I've been feeling this way for 4 months was this one feeling he was describing, and I was like, great, that's 1/4 of high school. Zoom out. Right. And I try to rationalize when there's feelings. You can't rationalize when there's feelings. So what I've since learned, and when I'm getting these calls, the first is meet people where they're at. I can't control, like, who am I to know what someone, like, I can't jump in with advice. So they need to talk. They need to get out how they need to feel. And from that place, I'm going to learn what do they need to hear. What I do now, though, is I ask them if they want to hear any of my own experiences, because the kind of the metaphor I use is if someone's in a level 5 hurricane, right? And you've never been in a hurricane before. This is the first time you've ever been in a hurricane. If someone says to you, well, it'll pass, like you're going to tell them to screw off because your roof is blowing off, the windows are breaking, you're terrified. But if you have data, hard data from either your own personal experience, you've lived in these areas where there's tornadoes and hurricanes, you've been here before, and you know that it does pass, and you know what's helped you or you've helped your neighbors before, or you have stories from other people who have experienced a hurricane before and you know they're still standing, that can help. And it also humanizes it because what I found is sometimes people feel like they're the only ones experiencing this. Most people don't share with one another, right? So I get these calls and it doesn't, for them, they don't have the relationships or they haven't cultivated those relationships where it feels safe enough for them to share this with someone that's literally right next to them because there's people all around them they can talk to. And so what I try to do is break that ice by humanizing it for them and sharing about what it was like for me. And we let the conversation go from there to see what do they need. Is it tactical stuff? Is it, the call I got last night, we had a choice to talk tactical or to talk the feelings that are coming up. And they needed to the inflammation, the inner inflammation, the stress was so high that they're like, Adam, I just need to take a step to help that go down. And then we can go to the other stuff. It's too much for me to go to the feeling stuff right now. And I'm like, great. And then we did what you described is we looked at the parts. We're like, great. If you're so overwhelmed by like this big thing of like, what am I going to do with my life? Well, let's break down the parts. What are some of the parts of that? And so when we break things down, it becomes a little bit more manageable. And we got to take a step and we got to go to the feelings. So, and breathing helps as well. Like
Yeah.
breathing, there are physiological things that we can do. And when I'm in it myself, I'll throw out the whole Rolodex from breathing to stress meditations to all this stuff to basically help calm my nervous system. And so, there's different breathing techniques that people can do to help do that. Box breathing is one that I like to use. Navy SEALs will do that before diffusing bombs. Like you can go from run, run, run to physiologically get into a parasympathetic state. So, and a way I train that too is I learned this from Wim Hof, the cold breathing guy, is I did a class of his and he said, we're going to do a meditation. And I'm like, hell yeah. I got my yoga mat ready. I'm ready to get cozy. And he said, okay, lay on your back, flutter kicks, 5 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Sorry. I'm like, and he's like, yep, we're going to put our body in stress right now, but it's safe. By the way, I had not done flutter kicks. There was no flutter kick training leading up to this. I think I'd done it longest, like 30 seconds at one point. He's like, so 5 minutes. And he's like, our body is physiologically going to be in a stress response right now. And our job here is just to breathe and realize we're going to separate our mind and our body and we're just going to breathe. This is meditation. And that was one way that, again, to microdose this stress training, to physiologically be under stress and to be able to breathe and be like, it's okay. And so, one of the many ways to get to practice this.
Man, it's funny you mentioned that because that is literally, I think, number one in my toolkit that I've developed for my own anxious state, especially when I reach like a heightened state of one, is I know that I can go to breathing as a focus. It's like it'll also pull my mind out of getting caught in like an endless loop, but the physical side as well to get your muscles to relax. So I'm a big proponent for, there's all different types of breathing and breath work that you can do. I'm a big fan of Wim Hof as well because he will put you in a state. If you're not in an anxious state, he'll put you in it just to show you how you can kind of, I don't like the word control, but you can start to soothe the relationship you have with the anxious state in the current moment. Cause like you said, it feels like it's forever. It feels like this blanket that comes over you and there is no time. There is nothing other than just the over consuming, emotion that we're feeling in that moment and the catalyst that caused it as well.
And we practice this with our 3-year-old and our 1-year-old. We got a 3.5-year-old and 1.5-year-old, and we practice this and we do it with meals. So I think food is medicine, and food is connection. Before we eat, that's one of the things we'll do is just take a breath. And again, do I get into the physiology of taking a breath with them? No, but me and my wife know that. Hey, look, we might have just gone from the go 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 of work, this or that, to literally just physiologically, let's ground ourselves, take a breath, and just be here. And so kind of that microdosing of that training of having these moments of not more stimulation, because there's a lot of stimulation, right? From our phones, from work, from our internal thoughts. So like calm the stimulation, take a breath, and just be. And food is one of those great opportunities to train that.
Yeah, and a very practical thing, if you're curious around what we've talked about, box breathing or anything, a simple Google search or YouTube search on guided breath work is an easy way to just figure out, and have somebody take you through what Adam and I are talking about today. I think I always like to think about how to give or reduce the barrier to finding something that could inspire you to do some of this, because I think breath work is a great way or a great tool to have in your kit.
Yeah, and that's it. It's a kit. That's
Yep.
like people have asked for advice here. What do you do? And at the end of the day, different things work for different people at different points of their life. And when you're feeling the feels, you take what's in your bag and you use and you use what's in your bag. And it's okay if, I used to do cold plunges and this like every single morning. And I don't do that now. It changed. It's okay if things change, but I know that there's a toolkit to fall back on when I need that reset.
Agreed. I'm the same way. There's nothing that's going to prevent what's going to come in our life, but it's nice to know that I have a few things that I can fall back on, right? When I need to at the most. Okay, I have a question I want to get to. It's a pretty
Please.
loaded question. But I know we've gone into flow here. You've been through quite the life experience. You do a lot of coaching, mentorship. I think one of the things I always like to ask people who are on is, what are two things that you wish you could tell your younger self? And I ask this question because I think it's inspiring to hear people at different points and journeys in their lives talk about which things they wish that they could tell their former selves. As a big premise of this podcast is, how do we share our life experience in a way that becomes somebody else's tool in their toolkit? So I'd like to pass it over to you and ask, what are two things that you wish you could share with your former self or your younger self?
Yeah, well, I'll caveat all of this with a quote that I heard, and I didn't need to hear this myself when I was younger, but I know that I've had to share this with a lot of people. Is that one day your story of survival is going to be someone else's survivor guide. So right, so whatever you've gone through, like you're still here. Someone needs to hear that you're still here for a reason. Keep going. And so that would be, to two pieces of advice here. The first is that there are ripples unfolding that you can't see right now. So when you feel like you're in the shit, you feel like you're in the goop, maybe you're a seed that's been planted. You don't know what's growing there. And so all you can control what you can control. If you can't control it, like, don't worry about it. So that's one piece of advice is you can control your mindset. You can control how you don't get to control what happens to you, but you can control whether you see if it's happening for you and what you then do about it. The second piece of advice that I would give to my younger self is to not quit when you're in the deep end. So when things feel really tough, like that's not the time to quit. That's not the time to make your decisions when you're in a grounded state. That's not the time to make the rash decision when you're feeling the big feels. You might still need to make that decision when you're in a calmer, cooler place, but that's not the time to quit. Don't quit when you're in the deep end. Keep going. And a metaphor that I love is just to keep growing to the light. My colleague, my flow coach, Henrik, he has this avocado tree in his backyard that he was looking at it one day and it did not grow linearly. Like literally the branch was bending sideways left and right. And he looked and he's like, all it's doing is growing to the light. Wherever the light's taking it, that's where it's growing. And so when I had become a new parent, someone had said to me to remove this one phrase from my vocabulary. They said, do not say I cannot wait until. And I would catch myself saying it is, oh, I can't wait until this. I'm like, wait, hold on. No, you're here. Enjoy this moment where you're at. And to give advice to a younger self is don't fight where you're at right now. You are where you're at for a reason. And so even though I might have my plans, if I want to do this, I want to do that, like you are where you are for a reason, grow to the light from there, right? The goals, the expectations we have for ourselves, like I used to hold so much weight on those goals and we can get into goal setting and stuff if you want to, but I now view those as are almost like an arbitrary excuse for forward momentum and friction. Like it's going to move us forward, but it's not about hitting that goal. It's about where is that light going to take you? Who are you going to meet along the way? What's friction is going to come up along the way? And it's an excuse for transformation and evolution and deeper connection. And so that would be my advice, and to find yourself a process that you can fall back on. And that's what I do now is I do this biannual self-listening where I check in on the different parts of my life. And it's not about, all right, I need to hit this goal. It's about how do I feel about where I'm at right now? Where am I being called to grow to in these different areas? And it's a process of evolution toward wherever the light's taking me. And it's okay if my priorities change, and having that grace with yourself that, hey, it's okay if I once thought that this was the most important thing in the world. It's okay if I used to stay up all night and do my work, but it's also okay if things change, priorities change, and responding to emails within 15 minutes is no longer my number one priority. There's some other things that take priority, but there's a version of Adam that responded in 15 minutes to any message that came through. That's a version of perfectionism that in a sense needed to die to make room for this other stuff. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that that's helpful for whoever's listening to this. I know those were some messages that I perhaps needed to hear when I was younger, and I've been practicing internalizing over the years here, and I find myself sharing that in different forms with people when I'm coaching or mentoring now.
Both of them are incredible. One on the first one that I wrote down, which you talked about controlling your mindset, right, is something that you can do. One very practical thing that I've started to do, and I think, you just pick up things along the way once you start to open up your ears to this type of mentality or mindset. But when I have a thought that's looping in my brain, I will ask myself, is this serving me? So does me being latched onto a thought, is it serving me to solve the problem at the end of the day? And if it's not, then I know at a high level, I need to let go of this. So it's my attachment to that thought that's keeping me in this circular place rather than, hey, is this serving me? Because sometimes it will be, because it'll be, hey, Josh, you didn't get this done. We need to go write this down to make sure that we don't forget it. And it's my brain's analytical side wanting to make sure that I don't forget things. But there will be times when I'm in a very anxious state and I'll think to myself, is lashing onto this thought serving me? And if the answer is no, then I do the practice of, which is funny, we talked about this, breath work to then help to create that, to break that attachment to that looping thought, because I view thoughts as like, everyone's seen a spaceship going through and the stars are coming by. I view that as all the individual thoughts that can come up in my brain, and sometimes a star will come by and I'm latched onto it and I can't stop thinking about it. I'll ask if that's serving me. If not, then I'll do my breath work that helps me realize that that thought is just another star amongst a million stars passing me that I can let go of.
Let me add on to this because I'm hearing you say two different things. One is this, and I love that metaphor of the stars coming by. And I have that same feeling where I like will attach onto it, right? But there's two different things I'm hearing you're talking about. One is if it's an idea, a to-do list, and that's the, but it can be almost like an obsessive thing of like, oh, should I go focus on that and to take that breath and then take the action from that grounded place. The other stars that can be passing by are really big feelings or really annoying people. Like people that are really, really, you know, pushing the buttons. And this is what I work with my flow coach on is it's the breath doesn't do it for me sometimes. And so what we'll do is it's almost like two parts and, different forms of talk therapy, different things work for different people. And for me, this is almost like a more of like a guided meditation where we're tapping into the kind of the subconscious mindset of there's two parts. One is like releasing the stress. So like that feeling, that star that I'm trying to hold on to, that person that's coming to visit, the feelings the feedback I just got, like if I'm currently fixated on it is release the stress. So I want to get to a place of like releasing the stress. And it's literally like almost like close your eyes and it'll eventually stop. And an insight will come of like, where's this coming from? The second part then is something like this is going to happen again. And how do I want to be instead when that happens? Almost like a positive goal statement. And so, because otherwise I'll repeat that pattern. For some people, the awareness is really helpful. And for me, the awareness is super cathartic, but I want to break the pattern. I want to evolve thanks to that gift. And so how do I want to be instead when, my brother's suicide was like a catalyst. It evoked a lot of shit. And I know I got calls for some people that were like, hey, your brother woke up stuff that also happened from my divorce, right? So this sense of death, unexpected death and loss, there's going to be different catalysts. And when you have that feeling come up, how do you want to be instead when that feeling comes up? And that for me is where a phrase of like, I'm in the goop came is I'm in the goop. Things are changing and it's super uncomfortable. It's literally like bubbling. It's changing and I don't like the feeling, but I'm in the goop. And that, at least for me, was a helpful perspective.
Yeah, I have it written down on my whiteboard so I can always see it, and it's something that I always try to teach people is if you're uncomfortable, you're growing. And I think that's something to remind yourself because when you're in the goop, it's uncomfortable. I think it's a word you just use here. And I think I also like the perspective because it helps for me, the awareness, the perspective of who I am and what I'm going through to always know, hey, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this feeling, but I'm probably going through growth right now, which is where we all want to be. Because if you're growing, I think you're opening up new possibilities. So if you're feeling like you're in the goop, just keep going because you're probably growing.
Yeah, and it's sometimes we get to choose the goop. That's what that it's tougher when we don't choose it, right? When it's
Very true.
unexpected, what's an unexpected person, an unexpected situation, unexpected catalyst, that's when it's the toughest. And that's when I find it's almost like you don't rise to the level of the occasion, you fall back on your level of preparation. I think that was a phrase one of my coaches once taught me. And so prepare, you train that. So practice being grateful, practice seeing the positive ripple effects, practice having that, wonder and awe and curiosity of like what's unfolding here and do that when times are quote good in controlled settings. And yes, it does pay dividends when the unexpected comes about, but it also allows us to enjoy the moment even more now. And yeah, see the signs, messages that come through from just the ordinary connections because they're not so ordinary. Like the fact that we connect at this moment in time with the perspective we have, with the technology we have, with all this stuff going on, like it's a gift in time. And sometimes we can lose sight of that because life gets, busy, hectic and go. And all the feelings we're talking about, sometimes it's kind of like a snow globe that's shaken up and it's a little clouded. but there's a beautiful picture behind it if we can take a breath, let the dust settle, and see the beautiful mosaic that is the world that we get to live in together.
Man, that is so well said. I want to kind of round out with one more question. We talked a lot about coaching and mindset, but one thing that we talked about in the pre-show was the death of old ways of thinking. And I think you mentioned that earlier on the podcast here today. And so just wanted to ask you if you would elaborate on what that journey's been like, what that means to you, and then, just ultimately how that ties into what you're doing on a regular basis or what you see with some of the people that you support from a coaching and mindset perspective.
Yeah. So it's tough because we don't do a good job with death in general on like the literal death side of things, right? It's a very taboo thing. We either talk about it or we don't talk about it. And when we talk about it, it's more about, what happened, and let alone the death. When I say death, I even mean the death of like an old perspective of that I need to do all night. As a small example, I need to stay up all night and I can't create anything unless I stay up all night, right? And which I learned in college, which I would stay up all night. I would procrastinate, put myself in a fight or flight response, and I would crush a 10, 20-page paper. And I could do that. And the same thing when I was doing strategy consulting, I would do a big PowerPoint and I would stay up all night, crush it, but I'd put myself in this fight or flight response. And that was like an example of a mindset of like, that was how you did things. When you created, your back's against the wall, Adam, you can do anything. And when my kids were born, and I'm just using this as an example of that needed to change. It was unsustainable for me to stay up all night and do this stuff in the name of work, in the name of creation, and things had to change. For that to happen, there was a death of old perspectives of Adam, you can only create when your back's against the wall and in a fight or flight mode. You can't be in a place of joy and calmness in that creation. You can't do it ahead of time. Like there's all these mini beliefs that had to die to allow for this new perspective to be born. And so I've kind of applied that into my life and in our coaching as well, of when we're talking about seeing the positive ripple effects, and we're talking about, when a ref makes a bad call in a game and our current behavior is to yell, 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 right? The employee doesn't do X, Y, or Z, and our current behavior is to just, berate and just give the feedback right away, not ask any questions, right? When we say, oftentimes people are learning about gratitude-based learning and leadership, and they're learning about this more grounded way of learning and being and connecting. They're like, that sounds beautiful. But then when you go to put it into practice, you have like two competing operating systems. It's a computer. You can't run two operating systems at the same time. And so how do we lovingly, say thank you to the one that served us? And how do we give ourselves a chance to integrate a new operating system? And the awareness that we can't do both at once. That's one thing we do. But then the other thing is, and this is, people look at cycles. I look at the way I train this for myself is I think of, a cycle of creation. You got 7 days. So from 1 week at a time, you've got a cycle of creation. You got a moon cycle every month. You got the year, right? Like people have different markers, their birthday, the new year, whatever holidays they're looking at, and looking at those markers as what has been called in me to change up until this point, what's no longer serving me, and what is being called to move forward. And the more intentional we are about that evolution process, the more this can come to life. Because all of the stuff we're talking about sounds nice. It sounds nice. But you're either forced to, or you choose to take a pause and integrate this in some way, shape, or form. It's not going to just happen on its own. And so for some people, it's like taking a Sabbath. For some people, it's like a tech-free 24 hours, right? Like, and that's what it started for me as, was like literally just shutting off my phone and just being. And it's evolved in ways since then. But whether you're doing that on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis, like taking this time to look at like even a daily basis where I was writing down the positive ripple effects and practicing this muscle. If you don't take the time, it's not going to just happen, but it's profound when it does. I don't know how to describe it other than that. Like because otherwise I'll go on to extreme amounts of detail with like, and that might be a part two here.
And I think that'll be something we'll have to do a part two, because I think there's still many topics that we wanted to get into. But I think this is such a great way to round it out, Adam, because it's like we've talked about all of these great, it's hard to put them into category, right, of great things. But you said it can be, when it comes to fruition, or you go through these evolutions of growth, it can be something quite beautiful to witness in yourself. Maybe I think that's a better way of encompassing it, because the goop and the pain are really not as beautiful as where, as the outcome of what they can elicit within you. But I think the point that I want to hammer on that you just talked about is it doesn't just happen. It takes time, it takes intentionality. It takes hearing something like this and saying, you know what? Adam talked about taking time away from my cell phone. Well, you know what? I'm going to take an hour back from myself. I'm going to put it in my closet. I'm going to put it in my car and I'm going to take an hour. Those are the small little practical steps because it's all about microdosing into vulnerability, into emotional intelligence, into slowing down. And I think if there's one thing I think that you and I would love for the world to do is to take a deep breath, to slow down, to be more in the present moment. And as you do those little things, the world opens up opportunities for growth, albeit it's forced growth via a catalyst like you've talked about, or what the most beautiful thing is when we take on the opportunity to elicit growth in ourselves without an external catalyst. How would you round out, taking a deep breath or kind of how you want to round out today? Because it's been a great time with you.
Man. Well, I wanted to start with thank you because what's great is even ideas create ripple effects. So, right? The thought of getting to have this conversation with you already sparked change inside of me, let alone the actual conversation itself, let alone the thought of who might get to hear this and what it might spark in them. And so, if I were to round this out too, is that perspective of being in wonder and the ripples of what's unfolding doesn't come from more stimulation. And it's kind of ironic, right? We're listening to this will be a kind of a podcast video form. It doesn't come from more stimulation. It comes from the opposite. And so whether it's, tonight you choose to put your phone on airplane mode after quote work is done and you don't need it till the next day, or whether it is choosing to, take your Sabbath and be like, do a whole 25 hours without your phone, and just be where your feet are. Um, it takes not more stimulation, but almost like a reconnection. And so people need to kind of microdose that phasing into that reconnection. And it might start with just not more stimulation with your phone, and it might then go to actually having a conversation with someone that you love, let alone someone you disagree with, let alone, some self-listening and tapping into, the higher power there. But yeah, not more stimulation, it's more reconnection. That'd be my 2 cents.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, for being on. Hey, if people want to get in touch with you, or what's the best way for people to get in touch or follow you if they found some things interesting today?
Yeah, so two ways. One on LinkedIn, Adam Fishman on LinkedIn. The other is our website, onoraglobal.com, ONORA global.com, and send us a message there and can get in touch. And yeah, I love it. Thank
Good.
you, Josh, for having me on here.
Awesome. Thank you.